Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Estelle Gibson. How are you today, Estelle?
I am doing great, Desiree.
Excellent. I'm so glad to hear it. I'm so honored to have you on the show. I cannot wait for the listeners to learn from you because you have some amazing information to share with us today. You are going to be dropping knowledge today. And so absolutely excited for this conversation. Just to share a little bit about you, Estelle, for the listeners, you are the owner of Journey to Freedom. You are a CPA, a holistic financial coach. You're an author as well, and we'll talk about your books later. But you are a TED speaker to top it all off. So congrats on that, and very exciting. Would you tell us how this journey happened for you? Like, what led you down this path?
Absolutely. So, first of all, thanks so much for having me, Desiree. I'm so happy to be here and speaking to your listeners. Like many people, my journey started with something that was not so great. After 5 years of marriage, and I was probably about 6, 7 years into my career, my husband came home and blurted out as I walked into the kitchen, I want a divorce. And like that, my life changed forever because I was left after 8 weeks of ups and downs. He moved out and I moved on, but I was left with the burden. As a financial professional, I was left with a house I couldn't afford, bills I couldn't pay, and situations I wasn't prepared for. And you might be asking, how does that happen to somebody that's experienced 7 or 8 years into their career as a financial person? And I reverted back to what I learned growing up as a child, that one person manages the money. And I find that this happens to many people. Most of the people, and I work with couples, most people I work with, when they're in a couple, one person manages the money. And so I handed over my financial power. My husband was really good at managing our money, and I was busy managing other people's money all day long. So I was thrilled that he was good at it, and I just didn't pay attention. And then when he walked out, I hadn't paid enough attention to know where our money was, my insurance information, how much investments did we have. I couldn't afford the house because it was in the 90s and the interest rate was 8%. And so I had to reclaim and regroup my life. I say that I had to rebuild my life financially and emotionally because I wasn't expecting it. It was so unexpected. So as I started to rebuild my life, I got involved in self-development communities and my church community. I kept running into people that would work on their money mindset or follow spiritual principles, and they would get better in that arena, but they still couldn't pay their bills. So they had the money issues, they had the mindset they were working on, but they still had the money issues. And then I'm in the financial arena where people have lots of money and they're worried about their money and they're worried about losing it. And the other people in self-development were worried about making enough money and worried about, so I saw that no one's having financial peace. No one is having financial freedom. Both of the communities that I'm in are struggling, even though they had money. So it doesn't always mean that having enough money makes a difference. And so that's when I had the idea. I started teaching some classes in my self-development community. I had the idea that to create something that bridged the gap on both sides, managing your money and mastering your mindset so you could create financial peace. So that's how it started.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Estelle. I think it's so important for us to hear the journeys that people take and perhaps see ourselves in experiences that others have gone through as well. And so what a shock, right? You were just completely taken by surprise in this situation, a divorce coming, and then just not being prepared. And like you said, in couples, so often it is just a singular person who is handling all of that. And I know I can speak from experience that that is how it is in my household.
Right.
I am the one who knows all the stuff about the insurances and the mortgages and all of that. And so
Exactly.
it is something that, I've thought a bit about, like, if something were to happen to me, my husband would be digging through piles of paper to try to find anything. So I think that's, a really great point to consider, first of all, making sure that you're both aware of what's going on. But
Absolutely.
yeah, not to get too far off topic, I love that you shared about how mindset is so important and the fact that it doesn't matter whether you have money or don't
Right.
have money. You can still be struggling with worrying about it. And
Right.
so, yeah, let's talk about this because I think this leads into something that you teach a lot, which is the money story.
Yes.
So, what is a money story?
So a money story is kind of based on a couple 2 different models that I use. The first one is a basic manifestation model that starts with your words create your thoughts create your beliefs create your feelings, whether you react or respond, that creates your actions, and that creates your experience. So we learn from a very young age because we don't talk about money and we don't teach about money. We learn about money from our environment, what we see and what we hear. And so we create belief systems based on our experience and our environment. And the environment is 4 levels. The first level, think of concentric circles, is the society that we're born in. If you think about the United States versus a third world country, how we value money, how we value credit, how we value spending, saving, all of that is very different depending on where you are. So the society that you live in or are born into. The second level is the community, whether it's a geographical community or a church community or an online community. Now we have online, which is so people are so impressionable from their online community. So, I have to follow my influencers or I get my values about money from what they're doing. So that's another community, your sports community, whatever it is, you learn about different things about money through communities. And then the next level is your family. I'm sure you can think of a family motto, whether it's we have to work hard for money or we don't have to work hard for money. We have to save for a rainy day, whatever that is. There's all kinds of mottos, thoughts, beliefs that happen in families. And then on a personal level, whether you've been married, been divorced, had a business, lost a business, been bankrupt. All of those things create beliefs that then blend into, and really your story is a system of beliefs that you have about money, whether it's I'll never make it, I'll never make enough, I'll never be able to keep up with the Joneses. They'll have money, I won't. I have to work hard for my money. Whatever that is, there's usually a story or 2 or 3, right, that you start to build when you're a child as you see things happening in your environments. So that's how the stories get created.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Estelle. Thank you for that. And this concept of these circles, sort of levels, if you will,
Yep.
that you just described, I had never heard of it that way before, but you're so right on. I think we do learn all of these things from all these different places that contribute to whatever it is that we're thinking about money, how we relate to money, how we spend our
Exactly.
money or save our money or whatever the case is. So I think that's just fantastic way to think about it and begin to understand what is really influencing how we're living our life. So
Yep.
and how we're dealing with money.
Absolutely. And it's unconscious because people behave out of the experience and the environments
Mm.
because we're not talking about it or teaching about it. So they just adopt it and then they drag it along with them. And especially working with couples, we talk about bags of garbage when you emotionally when you are in a couple, but there's money bags. And if you're not having active conversations about it, you're just going to assume that somebody is going to behave in a certain way that you're used to or not. And then it creates all the issues and the problems because there's no understanding, no community. So it's like a whole dynamic that happens in relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're completely right. If you think that the other person is on board with what you're doing because you're not discussing it,
Right.
you could be completely wrong. And
And
just
maybe
that assumption is so wrong. And yeah, that ultimately could lead to marital struggles, right?
oh,
Which isn't money like the number one thing that
it
couples
is.
argue about?
It is. And it's because I love working with couples because I'm a love junkie. It's just, living vicariously through other people's relationships. But what happens is people have so much angst and so much anger and stuff around money that it clouds the love. And when people realize that it isn't purposeful, that it isn't based on control, right? And what I'm trying to do to you, that it basically is based on a belief system that you don't even understand, that you've adopted. When they know all that and they're like, so you didn't do that because you wanted to hurt me? They're like, no, I just do that because my grandmother did. They're like, I mean, then the love becomes present because all of that stuff just falls away when people realize that it is not personal. It's just, adopted. Yeah, it's really something to see that happen.
Yeah, that's such a great point for sure. But I do want to kind of point out the other side of that, in that there are a lot of cases where controlling money is about controlling a person.
Oh, yeah.
And so that is not to say that that doesn't happen a lot.
Another
Um,
thing.
yeah. But if you recognize that somebody's behavior around money is something that they just maybe aren't even aware that they're
Right.
doing, it's not a purposeful action, then, can change the dynamic entirely.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things and why I did my TED Talk, and one of the things I talk about in my TED Talk, which is about financial dependency.
Mm.
And financial dependency, defined as being dependent on a person, a job, or situation for money. And then the feeling trapped is the thing you're talking about, where it is purposefully done to keep you in a relationship or under control and to keep you from getting out. So that it can, and that's called financial abuse. That's a part of domestic violence. And it's a whole thing where people keep you from access to money, period, so that they have control of you. And that is a very real thing.
Mm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk then a little bit about how do we figure out what our money story is? Okay. And then we can dive into the dependency, because I absolutely want to get into that.
Yeah.
But let's start with, how do we figure out what our money story is?
Yeah, so there's many ways that it can be done. In my book is a guided journal asking you a series of questions, but it really all begins with awareness. That we have to bring awareness and really want to have the desire to make a change and to figure it out. And I find that people do that unfortunately, when they've had a problem. So a divorce, an illness, a death, or whatever, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I've got to figure this out." Or they're in going to bankruptcy, or they're so far in debt that they have a reason now to figure it out. So my hope from writing the book and from doing some of this work is that people become aware without having to go through some of the issues and problems. And it can be positive things. It can be that you just got married and now you have to figure it out, or you're getting ready to have a baby, or your children are going to college and you're like, we got to figure it out. So it's usually some kind of a struggle that's happened and the desire to understand, why does this keep happening to me? Why do I keep getting in debt? Why am I still living paycheck to paycheck? Why can't I get out of the rut? Why can't I, create income that supports me? So it's usually a fact finding or wanting to find out and really being prepared to do something about it and to look into it. So that's where it begins. And then so it begins with awareness, whether it's answering questions or having conversations. It could be reading a book, Desiree, or it could be listening to a podcast and you hear something, you go, oh my gosh, that is me. And that is how somebody got to a different place. So, that's how it starts, with just that spark of, is there really another option? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I think it's so important to reflect. We've
Mhm.
got to, ask these questions and consider how did I come to this idea or this way of handling, my money or my emotions or my relationships or whatever? I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. I think anytime we can reflect and ask ourselves these questions, we can grow. But in this conversation today, we're specifically discussing our money
Yeah.
thoughts, habits, behaviors, all that kind of stuff. So, how can we begin then when we are reflecting on these things that we're doing to begin rewriting the
Mhm.
stories that we have?
So 3 steps: uncover, understand, and upgrade. So uncover is that awareness piece and beginning to see the 4 levels of what are those 4 levels of belief for me? What did I learn as a child? What did I learn in my family, my community, and my society, and where I live? And then understanding that and how it's affecting you now. Because the key is to make that connection. This is sort of what I learned. Oh my gosh, this is affecting me now. And then making the choice to, and sometimes it's enough just to see that and people go, I'm not going to do that anymore. Or going further and going, what's the dream I have for my money? What does wealth mean to me? What does financial freedom mean to me? And understanding that it is a choice and that you can, make the choice and to learn more and to do more and to kind of walk yourself out of that and to begin to rewrite your own money story of, and that's really the dream aspect of like, and it's different for every person. What does financial freedom and independence and peace mean to you? So some people it's, I don't want to work anymore. Some people it's, I want to give back. Some people it's, I want to take care of my family. I want to travel the world. So people don't even realize that they have those options. They're just in the daily grind or the everyday hustle of what's going on. And so it really starts with the dream and beginning to project what they want instead of, you know, going from needs and struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so true. We've got to look at what also do we want for our future, right?
Absolutely.
It's very, very easy to be stuck in that day-to-day grind where
Absolutely.
you're not taking the time to think about what your future is going to look like because the day-to-day almost feels like a crisis like every
It
day,
is.
and so if we can even just take a few minutes to reflect and understand, then we can begin to look at what do we want for the future. And I love that you shared that it can be different for everybody.
Yeah.
It doesn't, mean like you're gonna have a yacht somewhere or whatever.
Right.
Maybe you want to have enough means that you can give back to others. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Good stuff. So let me ask you, can we have more than one money story?
Absolutely. Let me tell you why. I have a framework that I call your money life cycle. So if you think about, and in each phase of the life cycle, you're either accumulating or investing. So you start as a child. So you've got everything provided for you. So you're not worried about money. But as you get older, you get to be a teenager. You're accumulating friends. You're maybe having your first job. You're having experiences that things that you saw from a child to teenager and starting, your money life, you're building now experiences. It could be something that happened when you were with your friends. You're starting to build that story. Then you go to the next phase. Maybe you go to college or you start your first job. You're starting to maybe accumulate debt. You're starting to get an apartment, get a car. So you're accumulating and you're investing in your career and still some friends. More money stories, more experiences. Then you become maybe a parent or you buy a house or you're deep into your career. You see how this is building. So there isn't one money story. There is usually a core money story that bleeds through, but then as you go through life experiences, then you get to legacy and what you want to leave behind and all of that. It builds throughout your money life cycle. And at each of those phases, you're focused on something else because when you're in college, you are definitely not focusing on when you're, like, having a family. You probably know that, right, Desiree? It's completely different. The focus is different.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense, Estelle, for sure. I can see how at each of those phases, you're focusing on something different, but these
Absolutely.
things can really begin to be making an impact on you. Like even when you're discussing you're a teenager and you're with friends, for us being, Gen X, it was like we'd go to the mall and we're shopping with our friends, but maybe we didn't have the same kind of money our friends had. And so a lot of stories can be going on there,
Absolutely.
and change your thoughts around money. And like you shared in the beginning, I don't have enough. I'm never going to have enough. Our family's never had money. Those types of stories on repeat can begin certainly at that point. Yeah, so I could see that for sure how multiple stories would be possible.
Yeah,
So,
college debt and, just all kinds of stuff.
yeah, for sure. If you're going to college and you have to have loans, the debt, and that can be
I'll never
devastating.
get out of debt.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what are some key points or steps or things that we can do to begin rewriting those stories that are playing in our head.
yeah, awareness is key. Going through and thinking about these phases that I've talked about, the levels that I've talked about. In my process, I have a 5-step process. I always start people with, "What's your dream?
Mhm.
What's the big dream that you have in your life? And then where am I starting from?" And so it's like a GPS. If you don't know where you're starting from, you can't even start a route. So a lot of people start with, "I need the 10 action steps." I don't start people there because those action steps might not be right for you or right for you right now. So people need to think about, what is my idea of financial freedom? What do I really want for myself, for my life in this phase of my life? And then where am I starting from? Because that tells you, what do I need to learn? And then that gives you your action plan. What do I need to learn? What do I need to put in place? What information, what people, and I work with as an environmental design coach in the area of people, places, and things. Who are the people? What are the places I need to have in my environment? And what are the things I need to achieve the dream? And then as people get started on that, then it's like, okay, that's when usually people get stopped. So you have to sometimes it goes 2 ways. Sometimes people get stopped, they can't even get started, so we've gotta, like, do a lot of work on what's stopping you, but then people will have an action plan, and they're not. I mean, this is you probably know of people that say they're gonna do this, and say they're gonna save, and say they're and they just can't, and that's usually a money story issue. Something is in the way. There's a mindset, fear-based, some belief system going on that is stopping them from achieving what they really want. So, yeah, that's kinda how to get started.
Yeah, thank you for that, Estelle. Really, I love that you shared the GPS. You have to know where you are right now.
Absolutely.
Most of the time we're like, okay, I have to know where I want to go. No,
Right.
you really need to know where you are to start that journey. And so that's such a great thing to think about is understanding where you're at right now and then also thinking about where do you want to go. And now
Absolutely.
you can draw the map to get there or, launch the GPS to direct you in that way. So I think that's an excellent point that you shared. And we can then look at what do I need to do now? And what do I need to learn now? So brilliant.
Because there's so much information about I mean, there's a full lot of information out there. It's almost too much. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And one person says one thing and another person says another, and this person did that. Well, that might not be the right thing for you. But people feel like, "Well, I'm just gonna follow that," and then it doesn't work, and then they get discouraged, and then, well, then nothing's gonna work, and then they go back to their money story, and it just feeds the money story, so we've gotta stop. We've gotta get something in place to stop that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the point you made about, if there's people who say, like, I'm going to do this thing or I'm going to do that thing and then never do it.
Yeah.
And the stories that are going on around that. And, when you mentioned it, it made me think of like, sometimes we are kind of a bully to ourself,
Ooh,
like,
absolutely.
I'm not going to do what you tell me to do,
We're rebelling, right?
rebelling. Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, you can't tell me what to do. And it's like, well, wait a minute. We're on the same team. Like, let's work together on what it is that we actually want. Yes, we want to have the good times right now, but we want to have the good times later too. So we've got to kind of figure out how we can make that happen. So, I mean, the cases are different for everybody in whatever situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why the big dream is important, because if you have a big dream and a big why, because here's the thing, people want money for a different reason.
Mhm.
They don't, money, okay, money gives them something, but it's usually the intangible that they want, whether it's the happiness from the going on the trip or the joy of seeing someone open a gift or whatever it is, the money provides something else. And that's the something else that we need to find out for people. What is the why behind why you want the money? Because it's usually not just the money or the thing, it's what the thing makes you feel, what it has, it elicits in you. So we've got to get to that. And then people will make the choice. But if they don't get to that, there's a theory going around now, especially with online ordering and things, that there's a dopamine hit in the anticipation of something happening or something arriving. Like, say you order something and you're excited about it coming. That's the dopamine hit. But when it arrives, and I don't know if you've seen on video, people have stacks of packages and stuff. Once the package gets there, the excitement's over. And so then they have to do another order because it's the dopamine hit of the anticipation of the receipt of it,
So interesting. It's
not
so,
the
so
thing
fascinating.
itself. Because how many people do you know get something and then they're like, not okay, it's the next thing. It's the next thing. And it's because it's the anticipation of the thing is what it's not the thing itself.
Yeah. What a great point. And I hadn't even thought of that because for me, when I think about it, if I'm getting something to arrive to me, it's
Yeah.
like a Christmas morning, I want
Right.
the actual like thing that I've placed the order for. That's
Right.
what's exciting to me. But I could see how, that is a bit of like a brain trigger,
It is.
that action and it's like the hit that you get from hitting that, order button.
It's
So
gonna be coming.
yeah, yeah, so interesting. And I think that, for the listener, it's important to begin to wonder, like, or question, how do I fit in this? Where is this
Absolutely.
happening for me?
Right.
And maybe it can help you understand also how you're spending your money, why you're spending your money,
Absolutely.
that kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely. Because, we have wants, needs, and basically for spending, but people spend for different reasons. And a lot of times it's unconscious.
Mhm.
It's just unconscious spending, whether it's habitual or what they've seen or what they feel, or it's a response to something emotional. I'll feel better if I buy that. Instead of dealing with the reason they don't feel good, they just distract by buying something. So it can be very complicated, but it can be a reaction to something else. A
Yeah.
habit reaction.
Absolutely, you're right, and I think that is important when you're looking at your spending habits, is trying to begin to understand what is underlying there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, good stuff, Estelle. Okay, so let's talk about your latest book, and for those who are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see behind Estelle, it's Poor by Choice.
Yes.
So, tell us what the meaning of the book is and what the listeners can find if they were to check it out.
Yeah, awesome. So the meaning of the book, it has like 3 or 4 meanings. So the first meaning is Ann and I talk about financial dependency, and people are dependent by choice or by circumstance. So choice was me. That was my story, that I decided or chose to hand over my financial power. But for some people, it could be that they've lost their job or they have an illness or they're in a situation that they, feel like it's a circumstance. And then it's a rhetorical question. Do we really have choice? Are we always at choice? Can we if we're staying stuck where we're at, is that a choice? So it's kind of a rhetorical question. Do we really have a choice? And then it's the crossroad back to the money life cycles. There are times in your life when you have choices that I can decide that I want to take a lot of vacations and not save my money. I can decide that I want to get into debt for college instead of working my way through. I can decide I want to buy the house instead of doing this. So, there are choices that we can make. I decide I want to invest instead of whatever, or do my spending and not pay attention. So that's a crossroads thing. And then it's back to the environmental programming. If we are a function of our environment, are we really at choice? Are we just operating out of what we've seen, heard, and experienced? Are we really choosing, or are we just playing out the money story? So that's kind of the thinking behind the title of the book. The book has 3 parts. The first one is specifically on financial dependency and is a continuation of my TED Talk. And I really wasn't planning on writing. I wasn't planning on writing. I'm a speaker, so I'm like a speaker that writes, but I was planning on doing like a workbook for what I was doing. And then I did my TED Talk, and so many people said you told my story. So I decided to write the book to continue that and to tell my own story. So my story is woven throughout it. And so the first part is about financial dependency, what it is, how it happens, what you can do about it. And then the second part of the book is my 5-step process that I just talked a little bit about. The what's my destination? Where am I starting from? How do I get there? What stops me? What's next? And goes into detail about those steps and what you can do. And then the third part of the book is 6 or 8 money topics and my spin on them, because I don't think about money the same as other people do. Like, I don't do budgets. We do spending plans because budgets are like diets. So I have a chapter in my book called No More Money Diets, because if I put you on a money diet, guess what happens in 2 months? You're going to binge. You're going to binge spend or whatever. So it's a different mindset. It's giving yourself the information so you can make a choice, a conscious choice about what you're spending in line with your dream. So it's empowering instead of, I've got to scrimp, save, restrict. That's what people think of when they think of a budget. So, and savings, investing, I talk about debt. I talk about building your financial team, because a lot of people stress about that, and it can be complicated. And you want to definitely get somebody on your financial team, whether it's a financial planner, accountant, or a tax person that you trust and that is working in your best interest. So, yeah, that's the whole 3 parts of the book.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. So thank you for sharing that with us. And you talked about the dependency aspect, and I definitely wanted to get into that a little bit more with you, but thank you for going into the detail. And the book sounds tremendous. I mean, it really sounds like you're covering a lot of the things that people are struggling with. And like, here's how we can work through it. Here's how you can
Absolutely.
figure this out. And I love the idea of it not being a deficit or the deprivation is
Negative.
what I'm
Yeah.
thinking,
Yeah.
when most of the time budgets feel like deprivation. And,
Absolutely.
and you're offering a different way to think about it. It's like, again, going back to choices.
Absolutely.
We've got choice A, B, or C, and
Exactly.
we've got to look at what's important to us and why we make any of those choices. And so I think that's a great way to look at it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm.
So do you want to talk a little bit more about the dependency aspect? Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, so like I said, people are dependent by circumstance or by their choice. So I decided to do this topic because I was just going to do a TED Talk on why people, it wasn't really on dependency, it was why people have environments that, and they're not talking about money. And then as I started to share with people what I was doing, they're like, "Oh, okay." They'd say, "What your topic?" I'm like, "Well, financial dependency." And they're like, "Oh, that's yeah, okay, whatever." And then what I would say, if you're dependent on a job situation or something for money, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that I can totally relate." And the other thing was that I was doing a lot of research, and I saw that nobody was talking about this topic. So people aren't talking about it because we don't talk about money. And it is prevalent because it goes beyond just, most people think financial dependency is you're dependent on a relationship and you're trapped or whatever. But let's think about elderly parents that are now dependent on their children. Because, I mean, how many people do you know, Desiree, that have elderly parents they have to take care of, living in their home, that are now dependent on them? And I've heard lots of stories about, you know, parents or loved ones that are moving in or are ill, and then someone in the family takes advantage of them because they can. So there's that. Or think of all the tragedies, whether it's weather events or things happening, divorces, and people have to move in with family, friends, and loved ones. So, it's a topic that affects people economically, physically, emotionally, and socially. And the reason I wrote about it is that people think it's just happening to them because there's not enough information. So I wanted to make it a broader conversation because so many people are going through it. And so it takes awareness, information, and support to combat it. And the support piece is really important because it's giving support and getting support. Because when people tell their stories, other people realize that they're not alone. And then there is support out there, especially if you're in a financially abusive relationship. There's tons of support out there for that. And just people in your environment and understanding the kind of support that you do need. So I talk about that in the book too. So yeah, it is people are dependent in so many ways. Young adults still at home with their parents. They're dependent. It's crossing now more barriers and more demographics than it used to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I didn't talk to anybody that when they finally got the definition of what I was talking about, didn't have a story for themselves or somebody they knew. My
Mhm.
grandmother, my dad, my brother, you know what I mean? It was so prevalent.
Yeah, for sure. I can totally see that. And what you pointed out also in there was about dependency on a job. And,
Absolutely.
I think that I'm sure there's people who are listening who know stories of situations like where somebody has had to move in with a parent because they have maybe lost a job or circumstances,
Exactly.
whatever the case is. But the dependency on a job, I think most people can relate to that.
Absolutely. You need the health insurance or you need the money because you have to take care of your family. And maybe you're on a job and you hate it or are harassed or whatever, but you feel like you can't leave.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in your book, I'm assuming there's things that you can discover that can help you
Absolutely.
with choices around changing that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Awesome.
To make to get a plan together, because so many times and it's difficult because you're in the situation and you feel like you're stuck in it. So it's hard to see a way out. That's where support and information and other, things outside of your situation, you kind of have to step outside of it.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do because people are struggling.
And immediately what I thought of is how you think like there's this giant wall in front of you, and I can't get over this wall. But what you don't see is it's this wide. And if you just
Right.
look over here, you can go around the wall, and I'm
Exactly.
kind of making light of it a little bit, but a lot of times we get stuck in a thinking pattern where this is all we see is how tall it is, not how wide it is. And we
Right.
can just go right around it, and then we
Absolutely.
can move on. And so I think it's important to consider that maybe we are, thinking about it in a way that's limiting us.
Exactly, and really thinking of the dream and having a plan because maybe you need to move in with somebody, but not forever.
Mhm.
But I think people, they fall into that and then they just it just, evolves into being worse and worse and worse, and then they can't get out of that, and that's that pattern of words, thoughts, beliefs, actions, because that's how it works. Your experience will prove to you and I say in the book that algorithms are a perfect example of that framework because it just keeps presenting you with the things that you keep looking for, right? So unless you get out of it and make a different choice and choose to search for something else, you will only see the evidence of the rotation that you're in.
Yeah, and what is that? The, reticular activating system in the
Yes,
brain. It's like you
absolutely.
think, maybe I wanna get a white car," and suddenly you see white cars everywhere on the road,
Exactly.
a white Toyota or whatever,
Right.
and that's all you start seeing because your brain is like, "Okay, let's find that thing." You wanna see that thing? I'll find that thing for you. And so,
Exactly.
whatever thoughts that you're thinking, you're gonna start seeing because your brain's like, "Here it is. You asked for
Yeah.
it."
Exactly. So you have to get out of that. And that's where the having a different conversation, having a different thought, being in, environment, people, places, and things. If you are around the same people, the same things, and the same environment, so you got to shift your environment too.
Mm.
What are the podcasts, books? What kind of people, what network am I in that I can maybe people that have been in my situation and got out of it? That's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. Yeah, and important again as well, like the community.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
who are you surrounding yourself with? And
absolutely.
we know that this applies to all areas of our life, whether it's eating right, exercising, not smoking, not drinking, having good money habits. It's like, who are your models? Who are the people who are around you? Because you're going to be just like them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff, Estelle. Okay. So let me see. Where do I want to go? Is there anything else that you want to share on how do you like find a solution for the financial dependency? Or do you feel like you've covered that pretty solidly? Or is there anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I feel like I have. Yeah.
Sure.
You
Okay.
just got to get outside of you just have to get a shift in the mindset and hear or see or do something else.
Mhm.
Which I know can be difficult because it's like the forest from the trees. It's hard. You just keep being in your rotation, but you've got to be able and willing to step out and understand and know there's a way out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good reminder. There is a way out. Yeah, for
Yes.
sure. Okay. And let's talk then about your YouTube channel because I'd love to hear what it is that you share on the show and what the listeners or viewers could see if they were to start following you.
Yeah. So I love to share a couple different areas of things. So definitely money. And some of it is like the anti money. What you might hear in mainstream or out there, I'm going to maybe talk about it differently. And then definitely mindset. So I'm going to talk about mindset. I also talk about neuroscience and the emotional brain and how that affects your mindset. I also talk about, I work a lot with people in transition. So they've gone through something. So if you're having a transition or making a change in your life and how that affects you and how you can navigate that. And I also work with couples, so I talk about couples and also entrepreneurs and how entrepreneurs can create use their gifts and talents basically to create what they want in their life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That sounds fabulous. Good, good stuff. And I love that it's the variety around it too. It's not just money singularly, it's kind of everything around that as well. That's, a
Yeah, the
part of it.
holistic piece of it. Yeah, that's why I
Yes.
call myself a holistic coach, Desiree, because if I ask you the question, is there any area of life that money doesn't affect? Can you think of one? It affects your
Not
health,
really.
affects your relationships, it affects your physical life, it affects it affects everything. So I try to talk about holistic topics and how money affects. Yeah, it's that's the holistic part of it. It's really it's a body, mind, spirit thing, but it's also an environmental piece too. It affects your well-being, your mental health. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Estelle, for sure. So good stuff. I will link the channel in the show notes so listeners can find it for sure. Before we begin to close out, is there anything else that you maybe haven't shared to this point that you really think the person listening should know? Oh, what would you like to share?
Yeah, a key thing that I always talk about is because there's so much information. And I have a saying, information without implementation is entertainment. So you could have all the information in the world, and if you don't take actions and if you don't implement what you learn or be aware and take some kind of action, you're really, it's basically, you might as well watch Netflix
Yeah.
because you can accumulate information and knowledge forever. But if you don't do anything with it, you've got to implement it and take some action. And that's the hard part, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Taking action on the things that we're learning. You're absolutely right. And I had never thought of it that way before, but it is like entertainment. You're just reading a book to read a book if you're not going
Right.
to do anything with it. And then hopefully you might as well just go watch Netflix then.
Exactly. And then the other thing is that so many people think that they have to, I can't manage my money unless I'm an expert. Not true. You do not have to be an expert, but you do need to be informed and involved. And you can baby steps. Just start something small, whatever the goal is. If it's savings, start with $10. Doesn't have to be 10,000. Just start. If it's paying off debt, make a list of all your debt. That's just start with something. Make a phone call, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be an expert. A lot of people think I can't do it because I'm not smart. Forget it. You don't even have to be good at math anymore. There's enough online digital things that you don't have to there's calculators. You don't even have to be good at math. So yeah.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you for sharing those with us. Excellent things to think about and to remember. You're right. You don't have to be able to calculate numbers in your head. There's online calculators and apps and ways to help you. So absolutely just do some research and you can find it.
Yeah.
So good stuff. Okay. I always love to have my guests share if there's books or podcasts that they think the listeners should check out. Do you have some that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I definitely do. So one of the podcasts I think is great, and I think it's empowering and uplifting, is Mel Robbins. She's a coach. Yeah, I love Mel Robbins. So I think she gives really great wisdom. The other one is Margaret Lynch. Margaret Lynch wrote Tapping into Wealth, and I'm a student of Margaret Lynch. She's just got if you are a person that's stuck, she's got really good information on how to get yourself moving, how to shift your beliefs. That's a really good one. And it's not a heavy one. I mean, there's other ones like the biology belief, but that's kind of scientific. So it's a little heavy. So that's a little bit more. Now, I always listen to some of the financial podcasts, like Susie Orman has a good podcast for specific financial things. I don't always agree with. Sometimes I don't hate watch, but I watch so I can go, I'm not agreeing with that. So there are some different podcasts. A book that I always recommend to people when it comes anything to money and mindset is Think and Grow Rich. It's a classic. It'll turn your thinking on its head because it's probably the first manifestation book ever. It was written in the 1920s. But Andrew Carnegie, it was all the magnates of the time that the person that wrote it, which is escaping me now, Think and Grow Rich by, oh my gosh.
Is it Napoleon Hill?
Yeah, Napoleon Hill. He actually interviewed these people. So it was an interview type book, but it's such a good book. I always suggest that one. Another podcast that I love, because if you're an entrepreneur, I love Diary of a CEO. I don't know if you've ever watched that. It's really good. It's by a guy he's British, a young entrepreneur, but he's got cutting edge, like everything cutting edge, money, AI, health, whatever. If you're interested in any of those kinds of things, that's a great podcast to listen to.
Oh, great. Estelle, thank you so much for those recommendations for sure. I'll detail all of that in the show notes. The books, absolutely. Think and Grow Rich. I read that years ago. And you're right. It's like, even though it was written so long ago, like 20s, 30s, it still applies today. And I think you're right. It's like that mindset manifestation, kind of stuff. Just, yeah, fabulous. Totally recommend it. And then you mentioned
Margaret Lynch.
Okay, so I will detail all of that because they sound like fabulous recommendations. So yeah, thank you again for those. So lastly, Estelle, would you share with us and the listeners how they can find you? Follow along with the work you're doing. If they want to work with you, ask you questions, how would they be able to do that?
They can just go to estellegibson.com. There's some free resources on there. There's information about my books, about working with me, everything detailed on there, and how you can follow me on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. So, yep, that's my main hub, estellegibson.com.
All right, perfect. I'll be sure to include that in the show notes so the listeners can easily find it. And thank you again, Estelle, for coming on the show and sharing all of this wonderful knowledge and information with us. I so appreciate your time and your knowledge. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we'll talk more soon. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.